Ladies and gentlemen, we live in an age where the word love is spoken constantly, yet rarely understood. What many call love today is not the meeting of two souls, nor the deep recognition of another being's essence. Too often, what we pursue is not love, but validation. We do not want to love, we want to feel approved of. We do not want intimacy, we want to be reassured. What we call love becomes a mirror in which we seek our reflection, a device to soothe our insecurity, rather than an encounter with another in their fullness. This confusion arises because the human heart is fragile and the human ego hungry. From early life, we learn to equate approval with worthiness. A child who receives praise feels valuable, a child ignored feels invisible, and so the adult continues this same pattern, mistaking validation for love. Yet true love, as every philosopher and mystic has warned us, cannot be reduced to the hunger for applause. Love is not about being seen in the way we wish to be seen. It is about seeing and being with the other as they are, without masks. To realize this distinction is difficult, because the addiction to validation is subtle, insidious, and often disguised as passion. It explains why so many relationships collapse the moment admiration fades, why so many chase romance not for companionship, but for the intoxication of being desired. Love is not the same as being chosen, and being chosen does not guarantee love. Until this truth is faced, we will continue to confuse the hunger of the ego for the nourishment of the heart. To mistake validation for love is one of the most common illusions of the human heart. The distinction may appear subtle, but it shapes the entire fabric of our relationships. Validation is the act of being told, in words or gestures, that we matter, that we are attractive, that we are enough. Love, however, goes beyond this. It is not about affirming an image, but about embracing the reality of another being. When we confuse the two, we do not love, we consume. We seek partners, not for who they are, but for the reflection they cast back upon us. This is why so many relationships burn brightly in their beginning and collapse soon after. The first stage of passion is full of validation. The eyes of the other light up when they see us. They praise our beauty, our intelligence, our uniqueness. In those moments, we feel alive, because our fragile sense of self has been inflated by recognition. But when the novelty fades, when their gaze no longer sparkles with wonder, our sense of worth collapses. We claim love has died, when in truth, what has died is the steady stream of validation that we mistook for love. Validation is powerful because it touches a very old wound. From childhood, we learned that to be worthy of care, we had to perform, to behave, to achieve, to please. Rarely were we taught that our value was intrinsic, independent of approval, and so, as adults, we continue this endless pursuit, the longing to find someone who will finally make us feel enough. But when this is our hidden motive, the relationship is doomed to disappointment. The other is not loved for themselves. They are reduced to a dispenser of reassurance. They are valued only as long as they feed our ego's hunger. True love does not operate in this way. It is not about feeding illusions, but about dismantling them. Love is the courage to face another person as they are, in both their beauty and their brokenness, and to remain present even when they fail to validate us. It is not a performance of adoration, nor a bargain of constant praise, but a meeting of souls in the raw reality of existence. When one confuses love with validation, intimacy becomes impossible, for intimacy requires that we drop the mask, that we reveal our authentic self. But if what we seek is validation, we will never risk showing the parts of ourselves that might invite disapproval. We will hide, we will curate, we will perform. And so, even if validation is received, it is received by a mask, not the true self. This creates a paradox. The more validation we crave, the less truly seen we become. To break this illusion requires great courage. One must first recognize the addiction for what it is, the constant chasing of approval disguised as the pursuit of love. Only then can we begin to free ourselves from its grip and open to something deeper. For love is not the echo of our need to be reassured. It is the quiet recognition of another being's essence and the willingness to be recognized in return. It is not hunger, it is presence, and presence cannot be mistaken for validation once we have truly tasted it. The addiction to validation is rarely born in adulthood. It has its roots deep within the soil of childhood. From the earliest years, we are shaped by the responses of those who raise us. When a child is praised for good behavior, achievements, or charm, they begin to equate approval with love. When they are ignored, scolded, or met with coldness, they learn to associate disapproval with rejection. Thus, love is no longer experienced as something unconditional, but as a reward to be earned. The seed of dependency is planted. If I perform well, I will be loved. If I fail, I will be abandoned. This conditioning creates a pattern that carries into adulthood, often without our awareness. Many grown men and women are still chasing the voices of their parents in the form of lovers, friends, or authority figures. They repeat the old pattern unconsciously, striving to impress, to charm, to be worthy in someone else's eyes. When they succeed, they feel momentarily whole. When they fail, they are devastated, as though the ground beneath them has disappeared. What they call love is, in reality, a lifelong repetition of seeking validation from new figures who resemble the old. The danger lies in how automatic and unconscious this pattern becomes. People may spend decades confusing the hunger for validation with genuine intimacy, believing they are looking for love when in fact they are trying to soothe the wound that was inflicted in their earliest relationships. They seek partners who will admire them, reassure them, or constantly affirm their worth. But such partners do not meet the deeper need for connection. They simply provide temporary relief. It is like feeding sugar to a starving body. It brings energy for a moment, but never nourishment. Jung often warned that the child within us remains alive, influencing our choices in adulthood. Until we confront this inner child, we will act out its unmet needs endlessly. This is why a person addicted to validation can never feel satisfied. No amount of praise, attention, or approval can heal the wound of not having felt unconditionally accepted as a child. Instead, each new validation fades quickly, and the cycle begins again. Breaking free from this pattern requires returning to the origin. One must see clearly how their definition of love was distorted in childhood. One must grieve the absence of unconditional acceptance and begin to offer it to themselves. Only then does the desperate craving for external validation begin to loosen its grip. Until this healing takes place, relationships remain fragile, built not on genuine love, but on an unconscious bargain. I will love you if you make me feel worthy. Such a bargain is doomed, for no partner can endlessly feed another's unhealed wound. To mature beyond this is to step into a new understanding that love is not earned by performance, and validation is not its substance. Love, at its root, is the recognition of being, not the reward for pleasing. Validation and love differ most clearly in their duration. Validation is fleeting, a spark that burns out almost as soon as it appears. It provides a surge of reassurance, a sweet intoxication of being noticed, admired, or desired. But as with any addiction, the high cannot last. The words of praise fade, the admiration becomes routine, and the sense of worth collapses once again. In contrast, love is enduring. Love is not dependent upon constant affirmations or external reinforcement. It persists through silence, through imperfection, through time itself. This difference explains the endless cycles of dissatisfaction many people experience in relationships. When validation is mistaken for love, the connection feels alive only as long as the attention remains intense. In the early stages of romance, partners shower one another with compliments, longing, and excitement. Each glance feels like confirmation, each message like proof of value. But inevitably, this rhythm changes. Real life returns, the workday, the routine, the unspoken silences. For those addicted to validation, this shift feels like abandonment. They interpret the natural cooling of passion as evidence that love is dying, but in truth, it is only validation that is fading, not love. Validation thrives on novelty, love thrives on presence. Validation depends on being constantly reassured that one is special, desired, or worthy. Love, however, finds its strength in the ordinary. It is expressed in the willingness to remain with someone not because they continuously inflate our ego, but because their being has value in itself. Love is steady, while validation is restless. Love accepts, while validation demands. The tragedy is that so many people chase validation endlessly, leaving relationship after relationship in search of a high that can never last. They confuse the fading of admiration with the fading of love, and so they never remain long enough to discover what love truly is. Real love does not always feel like fire. Often it feels like warmth. It does not always thrill. Sometimes it simply endures. But to the validation addict, endurance is mistaken for emptiness, and so they abandon what could have matured into something profound. To recognize this difference requires deep honesty. One must ask, am I seeking this person because I want to know them, to grow with them, to share in their being, or am I seeking them because they make me feel good about myself? If the latter, then it is not love, but the temporary intoxication of validation. True intimacy becomes possible only when one no longer relies on constant affirmation to feel secure. When a person discovers their worth independent of others' praise, they can finally enter into a relationship where love is not confused with flattery. In that space, love reveals its true nature, not as a performance, not as a constant reassurance, but as a quiet, enduring recognition that does not need to be repeated endlessly in words. The human ego is endlessly hungry for validation. It thrives on attention, on compliments, on the feeling of being admired. Every time someone affirms our worth, the ego grows stronger, more inflated, more convinced of its importance. Yet in this very process, the deeper self, the soul, often withers. The ego and the soul do not require the same nourishment. The ego feeds on applause. The soul feeds on authenticity. The more we devote ourselves to the pursuit of validation, the more disconnected we become from the essence of who we truly are. This dynamic explains why people who appear outwardly successful, beautiful, or admired often feel empty inside. They may be surrounded by voices that tell them how special they are, yet when left alone in silence, they feel hollow. The reason is simple. Validation strengthens only the surface. It builds a mask, a carefully polished image, but it does not touch the depths of being. The soul cannot live on borrowed approval. It requires a sense of worth that emerges from within. Jung often spoke of the danger of identifying too closely with the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. Validation reinforces this mask because it is the mask that people praise, the charming self, the competent self, the attractive self. But beneath this mask lies another reality, the true self, which is often neglected, doubted, or ignored. When we live for validation, we become more and more entangled in the persona, forgetting that it is only a role. The tragedy is that the persona may be admired, while the inner self remains unseen and unloved, even by the one who inhabits it. This creates a subtle form of inner exile. We may succeed in gaining admiration, yet feel alienated from ourselves. The soul knows it is not being nourished, even as the ego thrives. This dissonance is what produces the strange experience of feeling empty despite external success. Validation can never resolve this emptiness because it does not reach the place that truly hungers. The ego seeks the crowd, but the soul seeks silence, presence, and truth. When a person's life revolves around validation, relationships also become distorted. The other is not encountered as a full human being, but as an instrument to feed the ego's appetite. Love becomes conditional. I love you as long as you continue to reflect back the image of myself that I want to see. This is not love, but dependency disguised as connection. True love requires that the soul be engaged, that we meet each other beyond masks, beyond roles, beyond the endless hunger for reassurance. To shift from validation to authenticity is to reverse the direction of our gaze. Instead of asking, "How do others see me?" one must ask, "Am I aligned with my deeper truth?" This is not an easy task, for it requires the courage to disappoint others, to be misunderstood, and even to lose admiration. But what is lost in ego? Inflation is gained in soul realization. And only when the soul is nourished does life cease to feel empty, even in the absence of applause. Toxic dynamics in relationships often emerge when both individuals are secretly seeking validation rather than offering love. In such arrangements, each partner looks to the other as a mirror, hoping to see reflected back an image of worthiness. But when two people enter this silent contract, "I will affirm you if you affirm me," their connection rests on fragile ground. The moment one partner withdraws praise, withholds admiration, or ceases to provide the desired reassurance, conflict erupts. Love turns into bargaining, closeness becomes conditional, and intimacy dissolves into a power struggle. This cycle is not unusual. Many couples believe they are in love, yet what truly binds them is an unspoken exchange of validation. One partner may thrive on constant compliments, while the other seeks admiration for their achievements or sacrifices. For a time, both feel satisfied, but such satisfaction is shallow and unstable. No human being can endlessly supply validation without exhaustion. Eventually, one begins to feel drained, objectified, or unseen. The relationship then becomes a battlefield where both partners accuse the other of neglect, when in truth, the root of the issue lies in mistaking validation for love. Love differs because it does not treat the other as a source of egocy. Lie. Love sees the person not as a mirror, but as a soul. It asks not, "What can you give me to make me feel better about myself?" but rather, "Can I remain present with you as you are?" This presence does not collapse when validation wanes. True love survives the absence of constant affirmation, because its foundation is not the ego's hunger, but the recognition of shared humanity. When relationships are built on validation, they often oscillate between idealization and disappointment. In the beginning, partners idealize one another, showering praise and attention. Both feel intoxicated, believing they have found something eternal. But as the intensity naturally cools, they feel betrayed. "You no longer love me as you once did." What has disappeared is not love, but the stream of validation. Because neither partner knows how to love without the exchange of reassurance, they conclude that the relationship is over. This is why so many unions fail. They were never rooted in love, only in validation. The danger of this pattern extends beyond romance. Friendships, professional partnerships, even family bonds can become poisoned by the endless demand for validation. Relationships turn transactional. "I am valuable to you only as long as I continue to affirm your image." Such dynamics prevent the possibility of true connection, for authenticity is sacrificed in order to maintain approval. The way out of this trap is to begin relating without demanding constant egos. Lie. To see another person not as an instrument for one's worth, but as a being with their own depth. Only then does relationship shift from conditional exchange to genuine encounter. Without this shift, love remains an illusion, fragile and short-lived, dependent on the never-ending and impossible demand for validation. The endless pursuit of validation often transforms into a cycle of dependency that feels remarkably similar to addiction. Just as the addict returns to their substance for relief, the validation seeker continually turns to others for reassurance of their worth. Each compliment, each gesture of approval, each sign of admiration offers a temporary high, a fleeting sense of security and importance. But like any high, it quickly fades, leaving behind a restless hunger for the next dose. What masquerades as connection is, in reality, a dependency, a habit of outsourcing self-worth to external sources. This cycle is destructive because it never allows the individual to feel whole within themselves. The dependence on validation ensures that the moment external approval wanes, self-doubt floods in. One's sense of identity becomes fragile, contingent upon others' moods, words, and attention. Life becomes an exhausting performance, where every gesture, word, and achievement is carefully crafted to provoke praise or admiration. Beneath this mask lies a gnawing emptiness, a fear that without validation, one might collapse into insignificance. The cycle is also manipulative in its effect on relationships. People addicted to validation often unconsciously shape their interactions not to foster intimacy, but to provoke approval. They may exaggerate their achievements, play the role of the victim, or perform endless acts of service, anything that ensures the response they crave. Relationships then become distorted, not encounters between two authentic beings, but negotiations for ego reassurance. The tragic irony is that while this may produce temporary closeness, it ultimately erodes trust, because the other senses they are being used to fill a void rather than loved for who they are. Breaking this cycle is difficult, for the craving for validation is not only psychological but deeply emotional. It stems from early wounds, often from times when love was withheld or made conditional. The adult repeats this dynamic endlessly, unconsciously trying to win from strangers or lovers the unconditional affirmation they once lacked. Yet no amount of external validation can heal that original wound. It only deepens the dependency. To step out of this cycle requires confronting the emptiness directly, without rushing to fill it. It demands sitting in the discomfort of feeling unvalidated, of not being noticed, admired, or praised. In this silence, the individual begins to recognize that their worth is not dependent on external echoes, but is intrinsic. This realization is not a sudden epiphany, but a slow process of reclaiming selfhood from the hands of others. Only when this cycle of dependency is broken can love become possible, for love cannot thrive where one partner is constantly seeking to be reassured of their worth. Love asks for presence, not performance. It requires the courage to stand whole within oneself and then to meet another as an equal, not as a supplier of ego needs. Without this liberation, validation remains the hidden addiction that chains the soul, keeping it restless, fragile, and forever unsatisfied. At the heart of the confusion between love and validation lies a fundamental misunderstanding. Love is rooted in being, while validation is rooted in performance. To be loved means to be accepted as one is flawed, imperfect, unfinished. It is not earned through charm, achievement, or display. True love rests on the recognition of essence, the quiet acknowledgement that beneath appearances lies something worth cherishing. Validation, on the other hand, is always conditional. It demands that one act, achieve, or present oneself in a way that deserves applause. It is fragile because it depends on the continuation of performance. The moment the act falters, the approval wanes. This distinction reveals why so many people struggle to feel truly loved. They may be admired for their talents, celebrated for their successes, or desired for their appearance, yet none of these are the same as love. They sense, perhaps unconsciously, that their acceptance is tethered to conditions. As long as you are useful, as long as you remain beautiful, as long as you continue to provide what I want. Such relationships can feel intoxicating but leave the heart unsettled, because deep down, one knows that what is being received is not unconditional presence, but temporary approval. True love, in contrast, does not measure. It does not say, I accept you because of what you do. It simply says, I accept you. It does not require constant reassurance, for its foundation lies beyond appearances. Love can survive disappointment, endure silence, and forgive imperfection. Validation cannot. Validation is fragile, easily shattered by failure or rejection. Love is resilient, capable of weathering storms precisely because it is not tied to the fluctuations of performance. This is why the search for validation often prevents people from ever finding love. To chase validation is to live as a performer, constantly adjusting one's image to provoke approval. But in doing so, one never allows oneself to be truly seen. And if one is never truly seen, one can never be truly loved. For love cannot attach itself to a mask, it can only attach itself to the person beneath. To recognize the difference requires courage. It is far easier to live for validation, because validation comes quickly, often, and visibly. Love, however, demands vulnerability, patience, and a willingness to remain without applause. Yet it is only in this vulnerability that the deepest longing of the human spirit is fulfilled. Validation may soothe the ego, but only love nourishes the soul. And when one begins to taste the difference, it becomes clear that no amount of applause, admiration, or approval can ever substitute for the quiet, enduring presence of love that asks for nothing but one's being.